Thank you, Mr. Fannin. I now recognize Mr. Manchin for your opening statements.
Chairwoman Kim and Ranking Member Bear, I want to thank you all and the members of this committee for the opportunity to share my perspective on this vital and bipartisan economic and national security issue. It's something I put years of work into during my time as chair and ranking member of the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, as well as the Senate Armed Services Committee. When I joined the Senate in 2010, China put rare earth export controls on Japan, following a territorial dispute over islands they claimed ownership of, which should really sound familiar to all of us. From that moment, through the Energy Act of 2020, which created the critical minerals list itself, through my last day in the Senate, I focused on this issue. And while there has been good legislation, there remains much more to be done. If I could leave you with one thing today, it's to impress the urgent need for us and our allies to have strong, reliable, critical mineral supply chains across the three phases: extraction, processing, and manufacturing, so that no part of the process is in the hands of an adversary. The solution includes the use of our financing tools, like the Development Finance Corporation, the Defense Production Act, and the Export-Import Bank. We need to reauthorize and strengthen these key financial tools so that we have a full toolbox. And given the committee's focus, we must keep in mind that none of this works without diplomatic engagement. The Senate Department must focus on energy security with experts who understand the complexity of resource economics and energy geopolitics, with emphasis to prioritize the issue in country. Finally, we need to make sure that this effort is coordinated so that efforts across so many agencies are effective and don't work at cross purposes or waste investments. Here's why this matters now more than ever. Just like Putin weaponized Russia's oil and gas resources to try to scare off Europe from supporting Ukraine, Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party are more than willing to use critical minerals as leverage to put Americans and the free world at risk. They have ramped that up in earnest recently by flooding the market with oversupply, driving prices down, and leaving producers worldwide unable to compete, and then using export controls once they dominate the market. In fact, at the end of 2023, I held a hearing in the wake of the first round of China's export restrictions on gallium and germanium, two critical minerals that are needed for semiconductor fabrication. As I feared that export restrictions became a ban in the late 2024, with recent trade disputes, they have gone even further by cutting off our supplies of rare earths, antimony, tungsten, and more. That is why tariffs are so important. Tariffs are needed to protect the building blocks of our economy and national security, as well as those of our allies, from China's market distortions and economic malfeasance. That is what tariffs are for, to protect strategic industries by penalizing bad actors and keeping the U.S. prices competitive. Even worse than Europe's addiction to Russian gas, which is about 45% of supply in 2021, we are over 90% reliant on China for graphite, gallium, rare earths, over 60% reliant germanium, over 70% reliant for high-grade cobalt and nickel, and I could go on. And China's critical mineral grip extends around the entire globe. They control mines throughout the world, all of which feed a processing and manufacturing powerhouse that they control. So just as we cannot solve this problem alone, we are not in this mess by ourselves either. We must acknowledge that while we can provide much of the minerals we need domestically, we don't have the capacity to produce or process every mineral in the quantities that we need here in the United States, in North America, or even in a newly formed AUKUS security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the U.S. Even if capacity weren't an issue, we can't afford to spend $1 billion per mineral to support domestic suppliers. Our debt is a national security threat too, and we must come to grips with that. Permitting reform is essential to fast-track domestic production, but we also need to ensure that we are working with trusted and reliable partners when it comes to overseas mineral sourcing. That means looking first to friends like Canada, Australia, Japan, and Norway, but also building new trusted partners throughout efforts like the Mineral Security Partnership and countering China through the energy and mineral diplomacy efforts under the committee's jurisdiction. We must also be extremely cautious of our policies where the Chinese have a majority of control, like the Democratic Republic of Congo and Indonesia, and don't get sucked in when they have total control either. So in closing, the time to solve this issue is now, and Congress has a grave responsibility to step up to the plate. I look forward to your questions, and thank you for asking me to be here today.